Chaloka Dipati Sahampati Katanjali Anadiwarang Ayachata Santida Sata Paraja Kajatika Dese tu Damang Anukampimam Pajang. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sangham Namasami. So it's really lovely to see everybody, both here in the room and also online. And this is day 6 for me and Christine, day 6 in Canmore. And it's really lovely to be here. We've had a very wonderful welcome. Sanghamita's been taking great care of us, and we've set up a lovely monastic routine, and it's very good for the heart to have a monastery to practice in together, and a wonderful, community of practitioners all around us. And I'm enjoying this place very much, this beauty of Canmore. It's a remarkable place, isn't it? And the nature's so sort of pristine somehow, and it's very awesome. These mountains that tower over us, and the river, and it's just so much natural beauty. And that feels really, great privilege to be here, actually. We're very lucky, feel very lucky to be here. And, yeah. And at the same time, there's so much going on in the world around us that's difficult and painful. And within us also. You can live in the most beautiful places and still suffer. And, I'm just so grateful for the Buddha's teaching, because it gives us kind of resources, the means to understand suffering, to make peace with suffering, to realise that actually difficulties and struggle are part of life. It's not a problem. To feel that however beautiful the world is, however great our situation, however fortunate we are, we may still experience some suffering, and that's okay, that's normal. And then we look at the suffering all around us and can feel overwhelmed sometimes, confused. Why is this happening? Why are all these terrible things happening? And yet, within the Buddha's teaching, we have ways to help us to understand the causes of suffering, why there's suffering in the world, and how to work with it skillfully. How not to increase suffering, but rather we can actually work very actively to diminish, to lessen, to help the situation, both within and around us. So I think this is such a great gift, and it's beyond words, isn't it? We have a sense of direction. We have a sense of meaning and purpose in a way. How we can live our lives in the best way. And of course it's a work in progress because the Buddha's teachings are very profound, and very expansive. And for me, I'm most definitely on the path, so it's a learning experience day by day, and every day we can learn a little bit more and let go a little bit more and understand a little bit more, knowing that there's always more to come until we reach the end of suffering, until we've seen our way through all the causes for suffering and all the delusions, illusions, all the ways in which we get caught up in desire, in aversion, in confusion. And so, this First Noble Truth of the Lord Buddha, there is suffering. It can be, people say, oh, Buddhism is a bit negative, focusing on suffering. But of course it's not at all negative. It's like this is the foundation, or this is the accepted reality. And until we accept the reality of the unsatisfactoriness of the conditions we find ourselves in, we're going to keep struggling against the inevitable truth of suffering. Denying suffering doesn't help. Doesn't help at all. Actually, when I first started practicing, I was quite healthy and young and fit, and I was having a great time. And I wanted to learn to meditate, so I went and did a meditation retreat, and there's all this talk about suffering, and I'm thinking, no. I can't relate to that. I just like meditation. But of course, inevitably, as life goes on, stuff happens to each and every one of us. I don't think there's anyone who has the perfect, 100% happy life. I think that's probably safe to say that that's an impossibility. And so, things started to happen. And then I really started to understand a little bit better what the Buddha was teaching us. It's funny that, the first teaching of the Buddha was actually the Great Declaration. He met somebody on the road, didn't he, after he became the Buddha, after he woke up. And the wanderer who met him on the road was very struck, very taken by the appearance of this person who was glowing, radiant, floating along. Those are my words. I don't need to embellish it. He was very attractive to people. People wanted to be around the Buddha because of his peace, his well-being. And this wanderer approached him and said, goodness, please tell me, who's your teacher? What's your practice? How is it you look so serene and happy and well? First teaching of the Lord Buddha, he said, I am awake. I have no teacher. I realize the truth myself. I'm free from all suffering. I've attained nibbana. I've attained coolness. I'm at peace. And the wanderer just said, oh, good for you, more or less, good for you, and turned and walked away. I think that's really fascinating. He wasn't in the least bit interested to pursue. It was almost like there was nothing he could get hold of and be helped by in that. He was pleased maybe for the Buddha, but it didn't help him. It didn't help him. And so this via positiva, giving the goal and focusing on that doesn't really help us necessarily, because what we actually need is a way out of the maya of suffering, and it's very inspiring to recognize that there is a way out and that there are people who've realized complete freedom from suffering. But how do we get there? And so from then on, the Buddha started teaching the Four Noble Truths, didn't he? Number one truth, there is suffering. And I like this word, dukkha. It's a really interesting word in Pali. Dukkha. It gives the impression of something like a wheel, something that's like a mechanism And the do part is the brokenness of that. It's like a wobbly wheel. It's like a machine that has a piece missing. It's just like life. You know, it's good, but it's never quite perfect. We can't quite polish it to perfection. Or even if it is perfect for a while, even if we feel absolutely well, absolutely delighted with the conditions around us for a while, then inevitably they change and we're disappointed. And so this word dukkha, it really means unsatisfactory. It means slightly off kilter. Life is slightly off kilter if we're lucky, you know, if we're fortunate, or having a fortunate time, because at other points it will be more than slightly off kilter. I don't know why I'm laughing, because that's not really very funny. It can really be very off kilter. And, you know, so the Buddha was pointing to the imperfection of this experience, being born, being alive as a human being, and the inevitability, as I talked about on Friday, of, as a human being, aging, possibly getting sick, and that death is inevitable for all of us. These are the big challenges, but there are many, many, many challenges along the way, aren't there? And if not personal challenges, then challenges of looking around us and seeing what's going on and feeling the imperfection of that. So, the First Noble Truth, actually I find it comforting now. I'm a bit more mature than when I started meditating. To me it's very comforting that this is the baseline for us all. And we're all in the same boat. And there's something about that that's very somehow supportive. We're Sangha, you know. We're all together in this. We're brothers and sisters, friends in old age, sickness and death. We share this, and we can surely help each other a great deal on the path, because we all know what it is to suffer. And so it's the great equalizer, the great leveler, the great truth which begins to set us free as soon as we start to accept, well, this is how it is. So there's a until we kind of really take on board and consider and open to the truth of dukkha, the First Noble Truth, we're always a little bit struggling with reality, a little bit in denial, I could say. And that's an unfortunate place to be. So step one, there is dukkha. And for a lot of people I know in the monasteries come into the holy life because something's happened, something difficult, traumatic even. Something's really sort of, a death of a close relative, some personal trauma. Something's really shattered their sense of well-being, and thereby the doors start to open. The door opens to reality, and the spiritual search can begin. And so it's a very amazing paradox to me that for a lot of people, the big sufferings in their life are actually the very experiences that propel us onto the spiritual path. And we look back and we say, oh, thank goodness I had that experience, because if that hadn't happened to me, I would still be, rolling along and quite oblivious to deeper truths. And the spiritual path would have passed me by. That would have been a great shame for me. So, paradox, isn't it? Of course, in the times of great suffering, we don't feel that way, and it's the last thing we would want for ourselves or for anybody else. And yet, in retrospect, often we can feel, oh yes, goodness me, that really opened me, that really enabled me to see more clearly. That really was a source of great wisdom for me. compassion for me. So, two sides to everything. The First Noble Truth can sound rather depressing, but it's not at all. It's rather joyful, strangely joyful, to come home to the reality of the situation. Whoa, it's like I've landed. I'm on solid ground now, and from this place I can proceed in a real way, in a genuine way, in a way that's integrated, in a way that's in tune with nature, in a dharmic way. And then we have the opportunity to start to look at the other noble truths, second and third noble truths. So why is there suffering? And it's not what it immediately at first seems to be. It's not actually necessarily because of sickness or aging or death or trauma or loss, or misfortune, injustice. It's not actually because of those things. How extraordinary. At first it seems it's obviously because of misfortunes of all these different kinds. But no, that's not the reason. The reason we start to realise, the reason that we suffer is because we are wanting things to be other than the way they are. We're wanting something to change. We're wanting to rearrange reality. We're wanting to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. The ship's going down and we want to control a little bit here and a little bit there. It's desire. It's desire that causes all our suffering. Because those things that happen in life, the worldly winds of, good fortune and bad, fame and disrepute, the pleasant and the unpleasant, they're inevitable. They're just the way it is. And aging and sickness and death are inevitable. They're natural. They're part of the natural order. There's nothing actually amiss. The only thing that is amiss, really, when we look more deeply, is our relationship with reality. If we're not willing to allow and accept things to be the way they are. And I'm not saying we sit passively and don't do anything to help the world, to serve or to support. Not at all. I'm not saying that at all. But I think right action comes from this place of realisation. First of all, make peace here. And once we have a peaceful heart, a heart that accepts the way things are, then we can act very effectively. Because we're coming from a place of understanding. And so our work then, as spiritual practitioners, basically, is to notice when we start to fight, with reality, when we start to desire and we start to want to follow those desires, or we start to push away, act with aversion. It's the desire and aversion is not even the problem. That's not actually the problem. That's also natural, because we have past karma. So we have minds that are confused. So when something pleasant arises, I want more of it. I do. I admit it. And when something unpleasant happens, and I feel uncomfortable, I don't like it one little bit, and I want it to stop. And that's natural. Even that's not actually the source of our suffering. Desire and aversion will come and go. When we get caught is when we follow them. We immerse in them. We lose ourselves. And we're off. We're in samsara. We're rolling, So it's when I'm, rather than being aware of what's coming and going and just letting it be, letting desire arise and pass away, which it always will do, given time and space, or aversion, just watch it arise, feel it, just see how long it lasts and watch it fade. when we can be mindful, in short, when we can be mindful, we don't get caught up and we don't suffer. It's a choice. We realise, oh my goodness, I have a choice here. I don't have to suffer, even though there's all sorts of difficult feelings here and coming and going. Even though I'm really, the yearning and longing for this or that is really, whoa, wave after wave arising within me. All I actually have to do is breathe, relax, and be aware of it. And just watch the waves crashing, This is liberation. It's like a mini liberation every time we manage to stay steady in the storms, in the emotional ups and downs, in the just even slight twinges of wanting and not wanting. So the call is really to be mindful in every experience, in every moment, to be able to give priority, to simply noticing. Being aware of the body helps so much, doesn't it? Because this is where it all arises. The emotions surge up from within, and if we can have a good body awareness and keep that body awareness going throughout the day, we can catch the arising of desire and aversion, and we can then focus on them and just not let them grow into suffering for us, not let ourselves be caught up, not be sort of submerged under the waters, And so the first and second noble truth are always relevant, always important for us, and they give us the way of practice. So we can observe desire, aversion, two sides of the same coin, aren't they? And we can see the way out of suffering, which is simply to let go of desire and aversion, which is exactly what I've been talking about. Not to let them overwhelm us, but rather to allow them to do their thing, learn from them. And the letting go happens simply through observing, simply through not reacting, simply through maintaining our equanimity. I mean, it makes it, make it sound like that's all we have to do, so that's it then. Obviously, this is a life practice. It's not easy. And what we'll notice is, of course, we get caught up again and again. Again and again, we lose it. We're off. We're going down the waterfall. Crash, And then another aspect of our practice can be, surely needs to be, to forgive ourselves for that, As soon as we notice we've lost the plot, we're rolling around in suffering, just to come back, be kind, to this poor suffering being, and find ways to ease that suffering as quickly as we can. Recrimination, blame, judgment, they don't have any purpose here. But compassion and loving kindness help us to relax and just come back and move forward in a good way. So these qualities also become a very important part of the path, I would say. Metta, loving kindness, and compassion, karuna. They're the balm for the wounds. And we all have, past karma, as I've said, and it's like we don't know what's coming next. We really don't. We don't know what's around the next corner because we're not in control of our past karma. Cause and effect rolls on. And then the wonderful opportunity we have is to watch the karma as it unfolds and not to take it personally. So bad stuff happens, good stuff happens. It's not mine. It's not me. It's cause and effect. And an awful lot of mental complexity, mental proliferation can be cut through in this way. and we can stay very clear and very present if we recollect again and again the great teaching of the Lord Buddha of anatta, not self, not self, not to take things personally. You know, when we own our experiences, we can really get overwhelmed again with suffering. Something terrible happens to me, out of the blue, someone comes along and harms me. Why? Why me? You know, why should that happen to me? There's no answer to that. The Buddha said if we try to understand why things happen, he said in the language of the day, he said, as you probably know, our head will split into 7 pieces. I think the meaning of that really is we'll just go a bit crazy. We'll get very scattered and confused, and you know it's going to cause a lot more problems for us. We don't need to know the causes, but we can be very sure that there is a reason for everything. And it's not about blaming and judging at all, because nothing's personal. There's no one to blame or judge. There's just causes and conditions. So when very unfortunate things happen, rather than endlessly trying to understand why me and trying to make sense of what's going on, the quickest and most effective way to practice is to just accept this is the way it is right now, and to turn it around through our mindfulness practice. That is, to be aware, to be kind, to focus here rather than on any external happenings, people, events, rather than again and again reliving the traumatic experiences or wanting to say this or that, or to, we go over things that have happened, don't we, and we try and figure out how we could have done it differently. How could I have made this not happen? Pointless, fruitless waste of time. Waste of time. Best thing to do is to just keep letting go of the thoughts and come back to the body, isn't it? And to come back to the body is to really feel, and to really feel is to really get real about what's actually happening here. And the body will even also relive, but when we're in the body, we can absolutely connect with what's important for us. To really feel out what's happening, and we can find our way without even actually any sense of having to understand or having to direct ourselves, but we can literally let the body heal itself. And as we let the body heal itself, of course we're letting the mind heal itself, because they're inextricably connected. So as the body relaxes, de-traumatizes, maybe shakes and, whatever it needs to do, at the same time the mind is also able to disentangle itself from the kind of knot that it's in. And, there's no limit to these wonderful teachings, how we are helped, and the kind of guidance we can find in the Buddha's teachings, in the words of the Buddha. He said himself, there's not one single aspect of suffering that I have not experienced. He, even in his lifetime as the Bodhisattva, the lifetime in which he became a Buddha, he went through 6 years, didn't he, of self-mortification. Who knows why? He just felt that this was the way forward at that time. And for 6 years he starved himself, he deprived himself of every possible comfort, and he suffered physically and no doubt mentally. And he even went through, you've probably read, some of you, about his breathing practices. He decided, well, I've given everything else up. I'm eating a sort of grain of rice every few days. Or he was extremely emaciated. His body was racked with suffering, malnourished. mistreated. And he decided, well, what else can I do? So I'll hold my breath. I'll give up breathing and see what, see how little breath I can manage with. And it was so painful. And he describes in graphic detail what it was like, the pains that racked his body. And he kept going with this, So years of suffering in the actual life that he became a Buddha. He came to a point where he realized this was not very fruitful, and he changed his practice. And not long after that, he became enlightened. But anything we can do, we can learn from the Buddha's experience, because he talked about it again and again to so many people in the course of his lifetime as a Buddha. And he helped us because he enabled us, I think, to make the shortcut. So he said, this was fruitful, this was not valuable. It's not good to add suffering. It's good to release from suffering, to relieve suffering, to be free from suffering. Therefore, ascetic practices may have their place, but only up to a point, not to harm or hurt this body in the name of spiritual progress or spiritual path. So that's very helpful for us. So I've said a lot, and I think I should stop because I want to make some time for any questions at this point. So, A1.
If you're on Zoom, we can't see everybody's picture, so if you're able to go to the bottom and click on, I think it's called reactions or something, or raise hand, and then raise your hand. And if you're in the room, if you could come and sit on this chair so that the people on the computer can hear your question. Okay, we have a raised hand there. Millie.
Okay.
Oh, hi. Thank you. That was, fantastic. My question is about, suffering, obviously. And I guess maybe discernment or maybe some guidance on when you're having, for example, the upwelling of emotions, and it's like the discernment between whether you can let it go and find the peace, being able to watch the emotions and not have them take us over. The difference between letting go or whether we actually need to take action. And I'm wondering if maybe you did hint at that with, if we are able to let go and practice successfully, then our thoughts will become clearer and we'll be able to listen to our bodies, and maybe then the action actually becomes very clear. So we don't have to seek, we don't have to question, what is the action? It becomes more clear. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to that, the difference between letting go and taking action, or if there is a difference.
Thank you so much. Yeah, in a way I feel like you almost answered that so beautifully yourself, but it is something to really explore. I feel that, I don't know about you, but I feel that the experience of emotion, it's almost like, has a sort of wave-like a quality. And I think we sort of learn from our own experience with these things, but oftentimes when we're caught up in an emotion, when an emotion is arising, maybe in a way that can sometimes feel a little bit overwhelming, then we can be fairly sure, if we just hold steady, then it will do its thing. It will arise, it will really surge and feel very potent and powerful, and then it will crash, it will come to an end, and then it may arise again. But this quality really is a great teaching for us, because we can notice that things are changing all the time. Emotions are very fluid. And it's really good to notice that quality of emotion, that it's like the river, it's like the waterfall, it's like a cascade. And get interested in the motion of it, emotion, you know. And if we're observing emotion, then we're not actually caught up in it. We're not actually that. And that's an amazing thing to me, because I've noticed I can be, for instance, experiencing very profound grief and sorrow, and the tears might be flowing. But there's a part of the mind that's observing all of that and is completely at peace. So we can cultivate this aspect of the awake, the aware mind that can observe even the most powerful emotions. And then what happens, I feel, is that, as I said, the aspect of letting go, it's like a very natural process, you know. Emotions come and go. How can we get caught up in them when we recognize their nature of changeability? You know. Now sometimes we can have a very strong emotion that feels very fixed. Say like depression, you know. When one is depressed, there's a sense of a solidity to that. It's heavy, it's unmoving. It can be the subjective sense. I call these things like mountain sankharas, you know, that it seems so endless and vast and absolutely permanent, actually, sometimes. And then I think we can really take refuge in the Buddha's teachings. And even though we don't feel as though anything's changing, we can just allow the concept of anicca to come in and just observe. Is there anything in this experience that's moving? Is there anything about it? Is there any kind of edge to it that might be a little bit, you know, soft, that I can observe? And, you know, sometimes you're right. Sometimes we may have a sense that we need to act, and sometimes we just need to observe. And for instance, again, with depression, if there's a heaviness, a stodginess, a solidity to the experience, then sometimes it's really helpful to get up and move, you know, do some exercise, you know, go for a walk, and notice how that helps or not the situation. So we can use all sorts of strategies to work with emotions, and for most of us it's kind of trial and error, isn't it? We try this, try that, see what works for you with your particular temperament and your particular experiences. And sometimes the action can be to energize, you know, to bring up energy in whatever way we can. And other times, if we're dealing with anxiety or restlessness or, you know, agitation, then, you know, we can really help ourselves by actually bringing in practices that allow for some calm, for some relaxation, and so on. Sometimes it's really helpful to actually not focus on the emotion when it's really strong, when it's overwhelming, or when we feel stuck with some experience. Just to turn right away from it and actually just read a sutta, take in a teaching, read something that helps us to feel inspired. Go see a friend, you know, and have a conversation. Sometimes talking about what's happening can be helpful. It helps us to clarify what's going on. And oftentimes, rather than adding to the problem, if we're really skillful in our investigation, we can actually see our way through. So many, many ways in which we can work. And I thank you for this point, because yes, sometimes there's a time for meditation, stillness, sometimes there's a time for more active approaches. Does that help? Does that make sense?
So much, yes, so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Marilyn, yes.
So this is a question about suffering and what's going on overseas in Europe right now. And, we're removed from the harshness and the realities and the pain, but we still, I have no personal experience with someone of that heritage, Ukrainian or no one even probably. But I know that we're supposed to be able to send loving kindness metta to all. And I don't know how you can, I don't know how I can conjure that up in a sense to send it out to the perpetrators of the war that's going on. And yet I believe we're supposed to be able to do that. And it's beyond me how I could feel that way and want to send metta or compassion.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That's really something helpful to consider, because I think it's in all of our minds in a way. Well, maybe some people don't read the news and maybe that's just totally fine, but most of us are aware there's this war going on and it feels so unjust. And yeah, that we always, we often rather have a quite natural tendency to take sides, if you like, to see good and bad, and to want to support the victim and to want to sort of judge and blame the perpetrator, and that's very natural. I think we can ask ourselves what creates peace, what creates harmony, what is beneficial. And the Buddha, very famously and wonderfully said, there's a Dhammapada verse, he says, hatred is never appeased by hatred, only by love. And so it's a very clear, in many places the teaching is very clear on this, that the only way that we can help the situation is through loving kindness. And actually, I would say that each and every one of us has a part to play. And we may be very far from places of great suffering around the world, but actually that doesn't matter at all, because metta, the quality of loving kindness, has no limits. There's no limit in space and there's no limit in time to metta, to loving kindness. It's a power that knows no limits. And so there's a real opportunity actually for all of us. We read about terrible things happening. We can immediately, we have a job to do. We don't feel passive. We don't need to feel helpless. We can practice loving kindness immediately and always. And, we may find ourselves acting in different ways to actually physically help a situation. But the first thing is to make peace with the situation. And I would say in terms of, this tendency to take sides, if we remember the laws of karma, this can be very helpful. Remembering that there are not actually, although what we're looking at looks like it's about people and individuals, it's not really. It's really about cause and effect. And there are reasons for things that happen. And as I said, we can't fathom those reasons, but we can respect the fact that there are reasons. And a way that I find it quite helpful to practice loving kindness towards those who seem to be in the wrong is to recognize that, we know for ourselves, if we harm or hurt ourselves or another being, then that's a cause of great suffering for us. If one is a victim, if one is suffering due to the intention of another, there's no extra suffering there. There's the suffering of the assault or all the different ways the body can be hurt and harmed and killed even. But it ends there. There's no extra suffering there. But for those who kill, who maim, who hurt and who harm, tremendous suffering. immediately for those. And so I consider that, and my heart really shakes when I consider those anyone who has that intention to harm. It's very, very painful, and one can feel great compassion for those beings. And so it's actually very good for us and very important for us to have an even view of a whole situation, accepting that we don't really know what's going on. We only know what we hear. But whatever we hear, let's just allow it to teach us and allow ourselves to respond in the most skillful way we can, which is with an even heart, a heart of compassion for all beings. And this is a workout, I know. I totally understand and relate to that. But I think the call is very clear. Forgiveness, compassion, and loving kindness that does not distinguish, actually, between this and that. It's universal. It's all-encompassing. And this is something we can cultivate slowly but surely. And I really hope that helps. And if it's not helpful, come back to me. You know.
Yeah, I thank you very much. It's certainly made me look at it a different way. To reach that place is going to take a bit of internal work, but I certainly appreciate what you said. So thank you.
Sadhu. Thank you. So it's 9 o'clock now, so I think it's time to conclude.
Handamayang Dhammakataya Sadhu Karam Dharamase. Please join me. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.